Just as with the other races of the Conan universe, the story of the Stygians starts before the Great Cataclysm. Pre-Cataclysm Stygia was a theocracy controlled by the priest of the serpent god Set. Though the Stygian people are mostly known for their worship of the chaotic serpent god, worship of the peaceful ibis god Heron took root for a time during the Hyborian Age, until Thoth-Amon outlawed the worship of Heron and reinstituted the worship of Set by force. Along with Set, the people of Stygia also worshipped Derketo, the goddess of lust and death. In Conan the Rebel, a book by Paul Anderson, it is also suggested that Derketo plays some role in guiding the dead to the afterlife. In the same book, Paul mentions that the Stygians had magical boats called sacred wing boats of Set. In the time during which Conan the Rebel takes place, only one of the sacred wing boats remained. These boats seem to have been driven and steered by magic. A priest of Set would utter a command or make a gesture to steer the boat or increase and decrease its speed. The Stygians themselves were a mysterious people, and their ruling class was described to have been dusky, tall, hawk-nosed, and haughty. Stygian historians claim that, before the Lemurians arrived in Stygia, it was ruled by a race of giant kings. The Lemurians interbred with these giants, and the resulting offspring became the Stygians. It's rare for a Stygian to leave Stygia, and just as rare, if not more so, for a non-Stygian to enter. It is said that non-Stygian trespassers are killed on sight if discovered. Sometimes the act is without ceremony, and other times it may be done as part of a ritual. But it is unusual for captured trespassers to be allowed to live. The fact that Stygia is basically a theocracy also means that heretics and criminals are usually punished harshly. Being skinned alive is not an uncommon punishment. It seems that the Stygians not only worshipped snakes, but may have kept some as pets and guards. In the short story The Tower of the Elephant by Robert E. Howard, a companion of Conan, a thief, tells how he stole Black Lotus powder from a Stygia-bound caravan. According to the thief, the powder was guarded by a great serpent. It's hard to find any in-depth lore concerning the Stygians other than the obvious. The fact that the Stygians are the Egyptians of the Hyborian Age helps to fill in most of the gaps. We do know some facts from the stories in which they appear, as well as the essay The Hyborian Age. During the Thurian Age, the ancestors of the Stygians lived in the eastern shores of Thuria. These proto-Stygians are described as mysterious and non-Thurian. Their exact origins are unclear, but it is believed that they came from a mysterious continent somewhere east of the Lemurian Islands. When the Great Cataclysm sank the Lemurian Isles, their inhabitants fled to the eastern coast of the Thurian continent and were enslaved by these proto-Stygians. The slavery of the Lemurians by the ancient Stygians would last for thousands of brutal years and would see them devolve almost into beasts. Somewhere after the second, lesser cataclysm, the now ape-like Lemurians rise up against their masters and overthrow them. The surviving proto-Stygians fled westward, where they overthrew a pre-human culture and established the kingdom that would be known as Stygia. For some time it appears that the kingdom of Stygia grew quite unchallenged. At some point they enslaved the peoples of Shem. Somewhere around 14,000 and 10,000 BC the sons of Shem managed to escape the slavery of Stygia, though they seem to have been promptly enslaved by Thoth, and the Stygians are driven south of the river Styx, also known as Nilus or Nile. Somewhere around 9,500 BC things are plunged into chaos once more. After the fall of the Aquilonian Empire, the Hyrcanian hordes came riding from the east. The Hyrcanians and the Turanians were, during this time, united under a great chief and were almost invincible. If it were not for a combination of the Cimmerians turning on them and the fierce resistance of the Picts who had recently taken over Aquilonia, the Hyrcanians might have conquered Stygia. Then the Glacial Age began, and the Nordic people began to rise. Numidia became a Nordic kingdom ruled by the descendants of the Aesir. The Cimmerians destroyed Gunderland, fought through the Pictish hordes, and defeated the Nordic Nemedians. After that, they overthrew the Hyrcanian army at the borders of Brythunia. The Aesir and the Vanir swarmed south, further damaging the Pictish Empire. Nemedia is overthrown, and the half-civilized Nordic Nemedians must flee before their wilder kinsmen. The fleeing Nordic Nemedians defeat the Hyrcanians in Shem. Brythunia and Hyperborea and the descendants of the Lemurians are forced towards the Vilayet Sea. The wandering Cimmerians destroy the Hyrcanian kingdom in Turan and settle by the inland sea. While all this is happening, Vanir adventurers arrived in Stygia and overthrew the ruling class, and built up a vast empire in the south. This empire became known as Egypt. The first pharaohs are descended from these red-haired Nords. Sometime after all this happened, another great change came over the earth. This change is described as a great convulsion rather than a cataclysm, and it led to the continents taking on the shapes and positions we recognize today. Here are some notable Stygian characters, starting with Thoth-Amon. The most powerful of all Stygian sorcerers, Thoth-Amon was powerful and corrupt. Although he appeared to be a worshipper of Set, Thoth-Amon is said to have been more interested in acquiring power for himself. In fact, it is said that even the Lord of Stygia feared him. The most powerful sorcerer of Stygia had rather more humble beginnings. He was born into destitution, and his alcoholic father forced him to beg and pick pockets for a living. When a friend of Thoth, a boy named Amon, told him that he was offered an opportunity to become an acolyte of Ibis after warning the priest of an imminent danger, Thoth killed his friend and took his place. In the service of Ibis, Thoth gained much knowledge, and having an insatiable hunger for more, began to delve into the dangerous and forbidden knowledge of Acheron. He eventually went to the site of Acheron, where he was tested by Set and nearly died, but was revived by the Black Ring of Set, a powerful talisman that would be the source of most of his power. Returning to the church of Ibis, Thoth set to continue worshipping Set in secret, committing many heresies and setting horrible traps for his fellow acolytes. He was eventually discovered by his master, but defeated and killed him. Thoth then framed his master for his own heresies and continued to rise in the ranks of the church through political alliances and assassinations. Among his political alliances was Stephan, who was in the line of the royal succession. Thoth began assassinating Stephan's family while befriending him, and when Stephan was appointed king, Thoth was made his advisor and renamed himself Thoth-Amon. Thoth-Amon would eventually destroy the mind of the king, betray the church of Ibis, and declare the worship of Ibis to be heretical. After this, he would try to claim the lost power of Acheron, and failing to take control, be convinced by Calanthes to close the portal after a long battle with the demonic spirits that dwell within. Princess Akivasha was the eldest daughter of Pharaoh Thoth-Amon the Great, and was more than 10,000 years old by the time she met Conan. It is believed that she was a stunningly beautiful young woman, and while reveling in the purple feasts among Luxor's towering black halls, she realized that she could not bear the thought of growing old and withered, so she set out to seek eternal youth. She sought the favor of the dark gods to gain immortality and eternal youth, and was granted it on condition that she must consume the blood of the living to maintain her youth. Conan encounters the vampire queen during the events of the Hour of the Dragon, while searching the Temple of Set for an artifact that would help him reclaim the kingdom of Aquilonia from his enemies. Thugra Khotan was a Stygian sorcerer who reigned in Cuthchemes 1,000 years before the time of Conan. When his city was sacked by barbarians, Khotan ingested some strange poison and was locked in a tomb by his masked priests. The priests then died fighting the barbarians outside the tomb. After dealing with the priests, the barbarians were unable to break into the tomb and proceeded to sack the rest of the city. Khotan was later worshipped as a god by a degraded mongrel cult, who stamped coins in his likeness that they put under the tongues of their corpses so that they could pay their way in the land of the dead. A Zamoran thief named Chavatas tries to rob the tomb of Khotan and manages to reach the central treasure chamber, only to awaken Khotan and be slain by him. Newly risen, Khotan renames himself Natohk and sets about gathering his army. The rest of the story takes place in the short story The Black Colossus by Robert E. Howard. Natohk the Veiled One, as he was now known, is described as being inhumanly tall and clad in a shimmering green silk. He was also said to have had a voice like the hiss of a giant serpent and a skull-like countenance. This may sound very similar to how Conan Exiles imagines the giant kings.